Wow. Now that was well spoken and incredible. I'm really pleased to have had that presentation. Just on the subject of natural, like Roger's Natural Sugar, the Canadian version of white sugar, it is totally from GMO sugar beets, and it's important people know that. I find that most people don't. The word natural is on the package everywhere. Generally, if you're buying cane sugar, you're still okay. But due to trade things to support Canadian farming, which I generally support, most of the sugar sold in Canada as white sugar is all from sugar beets, supporting our form, because we don't have cane. It's a warmer climate product. That's my little round. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Shiv Chopra. He was a senior scientific advisor in Health Canada. He was one of a group of 3 scientists in Health Canada who publicly criticized Monsanto's data on recombinant bovine growth hormone instead of just approving it without question. Thanks to these whistleblowers and grassroots protests across Canada, Health Canada denied approval for bovine growth hormone in, oh gosh, silly thing turned itself off. In Canada, anyway, I know they did that. Technologies. That was quick.
Just move it a little time to time so that it knows you're using it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so that was in 1999. Dr. Chopra wrote the book, Corrupt to the Core, Memoirs of a Health Canada Whistleblower, to tell his story. We're selling copies out front. So there are copies, and there'll be more after the show, after the talk. In 2011, Dr. Chopra and his 2 former colleagues received the Canadian Journalist for Free Expression Integrity Award in recognition of their role as individuals who acted courageously in the public interest without thought of personal gain, and in doing so risked reprisals in the form of threats to their careers, livelihood, or personal freedom. Dr. Chopra is a graduate of veterinary medicine. He is a microbiologist and a fellow of the World Health Organization. It seems that Dr. Chopra must have been angry that a company like Monsanto can potentially use its power to influence those in a position of public authority and trust, like a Health Canada official. Abraham Lincoln once said, "You can tell the greatness of a man by what makes him angry." I am pleased to introduce to you Dr. Shiv Chopra.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It's a great pleasure for me to revisit British Columbia on a tour like this, especially invited by the Council of Canadians, because I did that same thing 10 years ago. The difference is, at that time, this is my observation, the people at that time were not quite as well informed. They wanted to know what happened in the story of the bovine growth hormone and whatever else was going on in our food safety in Canada. Now, 10 years later, I come here, I see wherever we go, the more people. Every hall is full. Age group is all mixed. And so there is a tremendous change that has occurred in public knowledge. This time they're not asking questions. When they ask questions, it's mostly showing their frustration to say, what can I do? That picture you saw. This is, I'm not angry, but because anger doesn't solve anything. I never was angry at any time. I had a job to do. I was employed at Health Canada, where I worked for 35 years, received from the Prime Minister of Canada, after being fired, 35 years of illustrious service, signed by Prime Minister Paul Martin, with a gold watch made in China. Those are still with me, and I'm still in court fighting to get my job back. And they're saying, "Are you sure you still want to come back?" I said, "Why not? I'm still alert. I'm still standing straight. I can do my job. I'll decide when I want to retire. You can't fire me." So, leaving that aside, the story, my part of the job, I'm not bringing you any science. I'm not bringing any controversial studies. I'm not bringing you any reviews by this scientist or that scientist, because that wasn't my job. My job was to apply the law to whatever drug came, whatever product came to my file, and with my job description, the law says that any company, any vendor who wants to sell any product, distribute, manufacture, that goes to people of Canada, and if that product directly or indirectly gets into the human body, then that company must conduct research as prescribed under the Food and Drugs Act, and bring those results to the Minister of Health, and those results must be satisfactory to the Minister of Health. Obviously, the Minister of Health is not a scientist. So, what is done is that people like me with scientific qualifications appropriate are appointed on behalf of the Minister to evaluate the data that the companies produce. If the company doesn't produce data, then it doesn't get approval. If it produces partial data which is not satisfactory, it is told to go back and do some more. Because their experiments are described, if there's any doubt, then the protocols of those studies are approved by Health Canada. We must be in agreement ahead of time so that the company doesn't say, "I've done this and now you're changing your mind." It's all done ahead of time. This is what you're supposed to do. These are the results which we expect. Bring them, and if we all agree, you get your approval. If there's any deficiency, you go more. If not, then even if we accept, then there will be some precautions, contraindications, warnings. Do not use this product in old people, pregnant people, women, or don't give it to children, and so forth. All kinds of things are done. As you read on your prescription literature, or the pharmacists tell you, don't do this, don't do that, or if something happens, go back to report to your doctor. Even after the approval is given, it is the responsibility of the company under the law to keep collecting information. That if things change that we couldn't predict ahead of time, then again those data are supposed to be submitted as post-market surveillance. Those data continue to come to Health Canada, supposed to, and if something changes and it's not good enough or some problem has occurred, then the product can either be suspended or cancelled or whatever. This is not what has happened with GMOs. You heard that GMO crops were all released without any studies. in 1996. No studies have been done, at least submitted to Health Canada, to the satisfaction of the minister, neither here nor in the United States, because the laws of both countries are virtually identical. If somebody in this process falsifies or lies, then the Act, Food and Drugs Act, is attached to the Criminal Code of Canada. That means that person who falsifies or lies gets heavily fined and or sent to jail up to 2 years. That law applies to the companies as much as to government officials like me. That is the law. Now I'm going to tell you what happened in one situation, one product, genetically modified, in my hands, on my desk, what the story was. It's all well described and all the other stories in the book that you have, so all the evidence is attached in there, because I've published the book since then. It's called Corrupt to the Core, Memoirs of a Health Canada Whistleblower. What happened was, it dates many years before 1996. Originally, I was hired in Health Canada as a vaccine and antibiotics expert for human products, drugs. It was halfway, about 20 years later, because I happen to be a veterinarian, I changed my job to go to the Bureau of Veterinary Drugs in the Human Safety Division. 1988. The first application that lands on my desk is genetically modified bovine growth hormone called recombinant bovine growth hormone, or RBGH. A colleague of mine had done the first review and he brought it to me for second review, and there was nothing in the review, only a recommendation to pass it. So naturally, I asked the question, is there any information, is there any data, is there any experiments done by the company? And the company was not Monsanto. It was a competing company, Eli Lilly. Why the two companies in Canada? Because the United States has passed a rule that for only genetically modified products and organisms, they can give patent, and only one patent per company, whichever comes first. This doesn't apply to other countries, including Canada. Because decision had been made back in the time of penicillin discovery that no living organisms or their products can be patented. That is the product of nature, God, if you like. You cannot patent that exists naturally or including their products, because penicillin was produced by a mold, and penicillin and many other antibiotics were never patented. But if you take that product and change it chemically somehow, and you say it's still as good or better, then you can get a patent on the process of doing that. Now, in this case of RBGH and GMOs, the US has changed its mind. Eli Lilly already held a patent on human insulin produced in a bacteria. A lot of you, any of you, may be using it right now. And using the same technology, several companies made RBGH, recombinant bovine growth hormone. And a fight broke out between Eli Lilly and Monsanto in the United States. Monsanto said, they hold the patent. Eli Lilly wasn't going to be outdone. They had the patent on insulin, so that after a long time battle, they reached an agreement out of court settlement that in the United States it'll be only Monsanto, but elsewhere the two companies can share the markets. It was for that reason Eli Lilly came to Canada and they said, we want to test our product. It's slightly different from Monsanto's, and we want to test it in Canadian cows. When I looked at that file, I said, there's no data. The company should be asked to produce data as required. So my colleague said, what do you want? I said, it's a growth hormone. Its job is to make the tissues grow. We all have that hormone, human growth hormone. Cows have it, so it's called bovine growth hormone. Horses have it, pigs have it, dogs have it. Every mammal has growth hormone. It's produced in the brain and is produced more or less as needed during the life of an individual or an animal. So, for example, women will produce more when they're pregnant or lactating. A baby will produce as it's growing. A child during up to adolescence, up to puberty, will produce more. So when you reach maturity, then it lowers down to a very low level for the rest of your life to make your hair grow, your nails, or wear and tear in the body, so replacement. So, but if you start giving injections of it, then there is a problem. And the proposal was that this hormone will be injected to cows every 2 weeks, and the cows shall give 25 to 50% more milk. So it'll be beneficial to the farmer, more profitable, fewer cows. But when we actually, by the time we were looking at it, that whole business of saying 25 to 20 or 50% came down to only 10%. Even with 10%, still, that's not our business how much increase occurs. We're only looking at the science of safety. So I said, ask the company to show us if when this hormone is injected into rats, will it stimulate other hormones that we can measure? Will it affect any other organs, critical organs in the body of the rats? For instance, if the pancreas was affected, then we could measure insulin. If the thyroid that controls our metabolism and obesity and thinness and so forth, then we'll measure thyroxine. If the ovary is affected, then we can measure progesterone. I recommended these 3 to be tested. And my colleague said, why are you worried about the cows and rats? I said, well, that's what's required. The law says the product should be tested in 2 species of animals, one of which must be a non-rodent. So you can't just test it in rats. So we'll have to do these, ask them to do these studies. This is the law. So he said, okay, but it's a protein hormone. Well, we should only be concerned about the milk. And that milk and the hormone will be digested in the stomach, so nothing will happen. I said, wait a second. I'm an immunologist. I've been testing vaccines, but I can apply that same science here. Ask them to inject this hormone, their product, into some rats, and feed the same hormone to some other rats. If you inject it, I would expect the rats to produce antibody. But I will not expect the rats to produce antibody when it's fed, because it hasn't gone through the intestine into the bloodstream. Based on our discussions, I wrote a letter to Eli Lilly in 1988. Something happened. The file was suddenly made confidential in Health Canada. It was locked up, and it was put in the custodianship of one individual who was called the file manager for this particular file only. We are all security cleared. Nobody had access to this file. Some years passed, from 88, we're now into 1993. The United States went ahead and approved RBST. The other name is RBST, they didn't want to call it hormone. And 1993, the United States approved it. But the European Union, Canadian farmers, American farmers, they were all worried that this could affect their business. If something happens to milk, mothers will be screaming and children will be affected, so we don't want it. And their argument was that if something by this time we knew a product, an insulin-like growth factor was coming out in more of it in the milk of cows receiving the hormone. IGF-1, which was known associated with causing cancer. So people said, hey, even if the hormone is not coming, now there's a new factor that's coming and that causes or maybe associated with cancer. So what are we going to do about that? And the second issue was when the cow produces more milk than it usually can, its mammary gland will be inflamed, mastitis will develop, and the farmers will be using a lot more antibiotics, and there will be superbugs. And people would pick up infections and die, and there'll be no antibiotics to treat them. That was a second concern. The United States said to their own people, don't worry. We will approve it now, and we will study it for a couple more years. If these things happen, then we'll think about either recalling it or whatever. 2 years have passed, and what was the study? What did they do? They gave this study to be done to Monsanto to do it. What did Monsanto do? They pooled all the milk for the treated cows and non-treated cows, and they said, no, we didn't find anything. No experiment. There was no way of finding out. They had no intention of finding out. This from pool of milk. How are you going to find this? 2 years have passed. Meanwhile, the European Union had said, okay, we'll wait, we'll put a moratorium for 2 years and we'll wait what the Americans find, then we'll think about it. Now we're in 1995. And the pressure now comes on us. As Canadians, we all experience this, that if America sneezes, Canada gets the pneumonia. Because the pressure is, the US has passed it, what's wrong with you guys? Are you better scientists? Pass, hurry up. And now the pressure is coming from way above. Lobbyists going to the ministers, the Privy Council, the prime ministers, and we're getting those orders coming down through our bosses who are not scientists, who are not veterinarians. They are either MBAs, economists, and things like that. But they're saying, hurry up. And in this situation, finally the department, somewhere above us, have decided to clear it anyway. And our Director General goes to Geneva. It's July 1, 1997, and he was going to announce, not in Canada, but in Geneva, that Canada has no objection, there's no human safety issue. While he was away, and during all this time, we were also being pressured to approve other drugs, other hormones for beef production, for pork production, and antibiotics, hormones. All kinds of things were happening. Pesticide was not our responsibility, but these were. So, with this pressure coming upon us, 6 of us filed grievances that we are being pressured to pass drugs of questionable safety, and the pressure is coming from the Privy Council of Canada. Imagine this low-lying scientist saying Privy Council. You know what? Privy Council is the highest authority. The head of the Privy Council is the Prime Minister. The Cabinet is part of it. The clerk of the Privy Council is part of it. This whole, all these people. And we have now openly declared war. That we're being pressured to pass drugs of questionable safety, and this is against the law, this is not in our job descriptions. We have to see data. And these things cause cancer. And you cannot determine residues of something that causes cancer. One single molecule attached to a single cell can trigger and promote cancer. And antibiotics, the issue is not a residue. The antibiotics are stimulating all these superbugs and killing people. And they said, don't worry about it. And we said, okay, now we're putting our foot down. We want a decision. Somebody tell us, if you approve over our heads, no problem. But if you're telling us to sign out, we can't. We should go to jail for doing that. And the grievance sat and sat and sat. And finally, we filed through our union a complaint that the department is not handling our grievances. Because under the labor law, there are limited periods in which answers should be given. Either the grievance is upheld or dismissed or discussed or something. They were not handling it. So we filed a complaint to the Public Service Staff Relations Board, and that's where the complaint has now gone. And our Director General, meanwhile, all this is being discussed, the Director General comes back from Geneva. The farmers got the wind of our grievance, so they sent telegrams to Geneva. This is what's happening in Canada. Don't listen to that guy who's come from Canada to say everything is safe. Codex cancelled the meeting, our Director General returned. He called us all on the carpet, and he's pounding on the table. I have to hear about you guys in Geneva. So I said, George, why are you telling these people? I did it. And I'm going to keep on doing it until you tell me what happened to my letter that I wrote in 1988. So then I said, listen, you're new to this department. Why don't you just open up this file, assign a couple of people, and say, look at the file. If data is there, if everything is okay, go ahead and approve it. If not, we'll tell you where the gaps are. He agreed. So he assigned this, 4 of us, and we got the file. Lo and behold, we found a study done by Monsanto, exactly the study that I had proposed to Eli Lilly. And the results showed exactly what I expected. The pancreas was affected, the thyroid was affected, the testes were affected. We don't know what happened to the ovary because they were all male rats. And antibody had been produced, so we saw it went through. That report was written up, I was the main author, and it was given to the department. Now there was a problem. This report became part of the court document. Now it was publicly available. The farmers got hold of it, and the department was not releasing it even under access to information. They were not even giving it to the Senate, because the Senate was doing an investigation as a result of the public pressure. The Council of Canadians and the Farmers Union and the Sierra Club and Canadian Health Coalition, they were all saying, we want to know what happened here. So, this report the department gave to the Senate, after all, is already in court. They blanked out chapters and pages and called it confidential. But the farmers got hold of it, they put it on the internet. Then they started to sell it for $5 for mailing charges. And then the farmers took this matter up with the Senate Committee on Agriculture, and when it went there, the Senate has received a copy which is blanked out, and they're fighting with the department that even the Senate cannot have this. They say it's confidential, proprietary information. So the Senate says, bring those scientists here to testify. So an invitation comes to us from the Senate. The invitation is not just a simple, polite invitation. It's just a polite subpoena. So if you say, if you don't go, you lose your job. So I said, sure, we want to go, but we want guarantees that nothing will happen to us after we come back. Because there we're going to have to tell the truth in public. There will be media, there will be everybody else. And so guarantees were given. Alan Rock was the Minister of Health. David Dodge was the Deputy Minister. David Dodge eventually will become, right after this, the Governor of the Bank of Canada for 7 years. And nobody could remove him. Now each one of them is president of different universities. You see how far this spreads in terms of control. You call this revolving door. And now we are before the Senate. They say, do you want to speak under oath or just affirm? We want to speak under oath. So they pull out the Bibles, they pull out the Bhagavad Gita, and they do all this, according to each religion. And we swear. And after doing that, they said, Dr. Chopra, you have an opening statement? I said, yes, sir. Before I make the statement, I have a problem. They said, what's the problem? I said, sir, the problem is this, that I just took oath to God to tell the truth, the whole truth, but nothing but the truth. But when I joined the public service, I took another oath. That was to remain loyal to the Queen. And now, the Privy Council people have told me only the minister can speak publicly, and anything I speak, I have to take permission from the minister. So I don't know what truth to tell, what's in my head, or what the minister is telling me to tell. One senator said, go with God. I said, thank you, sir. And I proceeded to tell the story, and this became a huge, huge investigation and debate, weeks after weeks, and televised at late night hours of debate. I think that's the only time, or at least rare time, when the Senate worked. The sleepy Senate came alive. It's gone back to worse rut now. Anyhow, all this went on. It was quite funny, actually, in some ways. And now, one senator said, "Is that the only drug? Or are the others like it?" I said, "Sir, since you ask," and I gave the names of 12 other drugs, hormones and antibiotics and so forth. And one senator, the top of his voice, "You are protected. Tell us the whole truth, more, whatever you like. Here you're protected, you're parliamentary witnesses and so forth. The parliament comes and goes, but we're the Senate. Something happens to you, even 5 years, come back, we will protect you." He was speaking at this level of voice. Fine. As soon as we get back, the screws begin. You got suspended, you got gag ordered and so forth. I'm told I can't go to any private meeting, to the YMCA or wherever, that I might compromise myself just in case. So I said, "What does that mean? Can I talk to my wife? Can I go to a restaurant? Where can I go or not go? I might as well sleep in the office then, locked up." So as a result, I filed complaints, and it went to federal court, and the court ruled. I'm just abbreviating all this. All of this is described in the book. It's unbelievable what happened. And this went on, and the court ruled, by quoting the Supreme Court, that when something like